This is the second video devoted to the F minor Prelude from the second book of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. The focus this time will be on the Prelude itself, and I will also be performing it in a more complete form in the sense that I will be observing the repeats. As for the temperament, I will use my favorite Rameau for the spicy dramatic touches that it adds. 20 years separate the two volumes of the Well-Tempered Clavier. The first book is dated 1722. The second was compiled sometime between 1739 and 1742. While I can only address the differences superficially in this video, it is evident that Bach was acutely aware of the stylistic changes that were taking place in musical language and was trying to engage with these changes from within his own musical style. The F minor Prelude provides a good example of Bach's awareness of the newer musical trends. Its highly expressive nature and contrasting ideas, coupled with a fairly regular rate of harmonic change, place it within the emerging Empfindsamer Stil, known in English as the sensitive style. This was a style that developed primarily in central and northern Germany that, unlike other stylistic trends of that time, emphasized the importance of expression over form. Perhaps not surprisingly, two primary exponents of the Empfindsamer Stil are Bach's sons, Carl Philipp Emanuel and Wilhelm Friedemann. Unfortunately, nowadays we tend to lump everything that happened between the Baroque and the classical style into the category of pre-classical, which not only does injustice to the variety of musical styles that coexisted at that time, but also, specifically in the case of the Empfindsamer Stil, we overlook the profound influence it had on later composers such as Beethoven, and also that it was the precursor of 19th century Romanticism. Getting back to the F minor Prelude, as I mentioned before, each section is based on what looks like contrasting musical ideas. However, at least in my opinion, all these ideas are based on the same source, namely the opening chords, so that what we have throughout the Prelude is different varieties of chordal formations that appear in mainly three different guises and pretty much make up the entire content of the piece. Let me explain what I mean by this. If I play the very opening of this Prelude, what happens there if I actually put all of these notes together, we have nothing more than different chords. And then right after this idea is over, we get this. And this is, again, if you put all the notes together, it's nothing more than etc., etc. In other words, it's yet another instance of different chords that in this case are arpeggiated. And then the third idea, this one is going to sound a little richer, and I will explain why in a minute, but this happens towards the end of the sections, both sections actually, but right now I'm looking at the one at the end of the first section, which is this one. So what happens here, again, we have arpeggiations, but the actual idea is nothing more than chords. And these chords are a little richer because what happens here is that up to this point we've basically had triads and seventh chords, but what we have here, if I concentrate on the very last chord that I played, if I move the C up here, we have, which is the ninth chord, and we call it a ninth chord simply because the root of the chord, the third, the fifth, the seventh, and the ninth, so that we get a ninth between the bottom and the top note, and it sounds like this. So what I would say is we get these contrasting ideas. They seem different, and yet we can relate them back to the very opening. They're different chordal formations. Now, I'd like for a moment to look at the last of those ideas, the one that I just played for you with the 9 chords, as it is the one I find more harmonically captivating and the one that I feel would perfectly fit within a jazz idiom, hence the reference to this being a jazzy prelude. As I mentioned before, this idea appears towards the ends of both sections, and right now I would like to concentrate on its reappearance in the second section. So if I play that part now, it sounds like this. And if I put it into chords, again, we have a bunch of 9th chords here, but if I actually play chords instead of arpeggiating them like Bach has written them, the effect is this. And I resolved it there, although this is not exactly what Bach does, which I also think it's very interesting, because if I continue from where I left off, which was this idea here, you can see that what is happening is we're very, very close to the end of the prelude. There's 4 more measures left. And after this wonderfully rich progression, we have reached what seems like an F minor chord. Again, we're missing the C. It's going to happen. We get the C here, we get the F here, but then immediately so the F minor chord is delayed to the very, very end, and even at the end, Bach could have done something like this. But no. So we're waiting for the confirmation of the tonic until the very, very final moment. And of course, this kind of idea to give us a dissonance on the strong beat has been part of the entire musical language of this prelude, but it continues all the way to the very end. And of course, this is what is so fascinating about this piece. And I would say when you listen to these 9th chords, you can tell why Bach was so fascinating to jazz musicians already in the 50s and 60s, and why he influenced them, because these 9th chords could very well have been found in a standard jazz piece of that time. Now, finally, one more thing I would like to mention in terms of performing this piece. And of course, this is something that is very, very difficult to explain, but I've already mentioned that this piece, I think, looks towards the emerging Empfindsamer-Stil. Now, this doesn't mean that previous pieces by Bach are not expressive, but especially this kind of piece to me really needs to be played in a very expressive way. And in general, Baroque music is a lot more expressive than a lot of people think. And there is a view out there. Thankfully, it's quite outdated and it's going away, but it hasn't gone away yet. That, you know, Bach's music is about structure and we should play it in a rhythmically very strict way. To me, this is the wrong approach, not just for Bach, but for Baroque music in general. Obviously, you can't play it, you can't take the same kind of rhythmic liberties that you would take in, let's say, a romantic piece. I would say that sometimes in Baroque music, the rhythmic flexibility has to do with smaller units, things that happen within a measure or within a beat or two. It's perhaps a slightly subtler kind of way of taking rhythmic liberties. But I think those liberties should be taken, especially in a piece like this, and you will hear it in my performance. Here I simply want to look at the very opening of the piece and tell you how I approach it. So again, if we look at the very beginning, what we have is everything, by the way, in the right hand is written in pure eighth notes. And we have the upbeat, the downbeat, and then the resolution. The resolution, by the way, happens on the weak beat. So what this means is that Bach wants to give us the suspension, he wants to give us the dissonance, shall we say, on the strong beats. So I think the worst thing that you can do with this piece is to play it metrically strict and play exactly what you see and do. This is not going to do anything at all. A second level of this, to bring out the dissonance, would be to really linger on the second one of these. So I play the upbeat short, the strong beat long, and I play it long in the sense that I'm going to let it go all the way to the next chord, and the next chord is going to be short again. So I'm not going to play the last of those three ideas, these three chords. I'm not going to play it like an eighth note. I won't do this, I will do. So this is the second level. And already I think the piece is becoming more expressive. Now the third level, which is what I do in my performance, is that not only do I have the strong beat bleed through to the weak beat, but I also try to delay getting to the resolution as much as I can. It's a very subtle difference, but it's a difference between this and this. So that the final result is something like this. And to me, this is already a sort of a rhythmic liberty, but obviously it happens within the measure. And to me, these kinds of rhythmic liberties and perhaps better said, rhythmic flexibilities are crucial in making this piece as expressive as possible. And I do this in different ways throughout this prelude. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.